Welcome to another Monday morning. Monday morning. Good Lord.
Monday
Monday
mo
evening. It's a long
ah,
day. It was a long
oh,
weekend.
it's that was so funny. She just said before we literally clicked the button to go live, she wanted to hibernate. So, and that's what got me laughing. Well, anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome YouTube. Welcome Twitch. Welcome Rumble. Welcome our two Facebook pages and our two Instagram pages. These will be uploaded to iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and Spotify in the future. And, of course, YouTube. I think I said that. Anyway, happy Monday, Becky.
I mean, Monday. How was your weekend, my dear?
It was
Mm.
quiet. How about yours? You were busy.
Yes, my daughter ended up and had TVC track, so I spent all weekend out at track meet. Not all weekend, all day Saturday essentially. At a track meet and got a lot of sun. Enjoyed watching her run and watching her teammates and everyone. So that was her brother come out to watch her, him and his girlfriend and my mother, and so we all just hung out at the track meet, and that was kind of Saturday. And then we ran errands and worked around the house, and I meal prepped on Sunday, so which was kind of nice, kind of a change. Normally I meal prep on Mondays, but it was kind of nice this morning to have everything ready to go.
Right? Very good. Very good. Yeah. So tonight's topic is ask me what you really want to know before you eat that. So we had this again, Becky and I talked during the day. So we had this whole conversation around that, and we came up with some pretty good tips and some things that um, we thought would be kind of a fun topic. And of course, if you have absolutely any questions, please post them in the chat and we can get those answered as well. So I guess we can just dive right in.
Yeah, that we can. It's one of those topics where, many people, I guess, over the years, right? They don't know what to eat, or they eat
Yeah.
for various reasons, and that's kind of what we were discussing. Is if they were eating, sorry, it's giving me some destination thing. Um, Prior to eating, tell me what to eat, tell me when to eat, and that whole side of
I know.
things, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of what we were discussing, and that's where we come up with ask me what you really want to know, because what I have to say is probably not what you end up and really want to hear. But I think that's also what makes a good coach, is not telling a person what they want to hear, but telling them what they need to hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's really it comes down to a reality check, right? Um before you eat that, I mean, you need to really investigate what's going on. Is it hunger or is it a habit? And I know
Mm.
you've got some great acronyms that you were saying that you have with the
Yeah, and that's where I'll work with my clients, because when we're in those situations, it's always easier to, remember something like that, right? I know we have Coach Sly that talks about the halt side of things with addiction. But depending on the client, right? I will end up and use various ones. So maybe that's, something like BRASS, which stands for Are You Bored? Are you just trying to relax and chill, right, on
right.
the couch? um are you angry, stressed, or sad? And what is it that you're trying to eat, right, to end up and kind of calm or fix those, which kind of leads into the other one, which is fixes. Frustrated, insecure, exhausted, empty, and stressed, right? Because before you eat, always ask yourself, what am I trying to fix? Or, what am I craving? Quote, crave: confused, restless, anxious, vulnerable, or emotionally triggered. Did something happen to trigger you into one of those emotions? And do you actually need to sit with that emotion, feel that emotion, Because too many times we end up on the side of addiction, and we're leading into that with food, um, which you and I were discussing another person right now that is going through a weight loss journey, and it's a male, and he's struggling with the addiction side of food, and he's heavily overweight, um,
Mhm.
but he is really working on so he's lost weight before doing, other programs, and he never worked on the underlying issue, right? So anytime
Right.
that he changed that, right, what he did was quote a diet, right? It wasn't anything that was sustainable, and he didn't come out of the diet in a positive way. And so when he quit, then he ended up, having these underlying issues, and he gained the weight back. Where now this time around, he's going about it differently, to where he's working with the therapist, he's working on the emotional side, he's really working on what is it that triggers him to get into that point. And again, that's where, whether it's HALT or you look at these acronyms or these abbreviations in the aspect of what are you trying to numb?
Right.
And, are you just killing time and you're bored? Or, there's
Right.
so many, right? There's blame, there's snack. I mean, I have several different ones because everyone tends to end up and lead to food in a different reason or different way. And so
Mhm.
just really taking that time to pause and check before you're grabbing a bite really does end up and make a big difference, right? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
times where if people are really, tracking, I will also tell them, make sure that you're checking the BLTs, right? The bites, the lick, the taste. Because I've had parents where their kid is eating a meal and, oh, but I only had a couple bites,
Mhm.
right? What if you have 3 kids and you're having a bite off of each because they didn't finish their plate? Um, it can end up and add up.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's things like that that really looking at our habits make a difference in our food decision making.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, are you responding to stress? Um, I know you had a stressful situation here the last few days, and you were very meticulous at what you did because what you wanted versus what you ended up eating, um, but you were very aware of it,
Mhm.
you
And
know?
I think that's where a lot of people end up, and they really, again, haven't worked on it, right? I've done
Right.
a lot of work on the emotional side and really being present in the moment,
Hmm.
right? I'm not getting into my head of what my head wants.
Right.
I'm into what is going to actually nourish me, right? What
Right.
is keeping me on track of the goals that I have set? And I think that's one of the biggest things. Um, because there's people that have asked me, "Oh, you did this, and are you, what are you gonna do now?" Well, I
Hmm.
never have I have very moving goals, right? Because I'm constantly looking at what is the next step, right? What is the next goal? I think constantly having those type of goals, whether it's be the short term or the long term goal, but I'm not constantly jumping ship and tweaking things, or, on a diet for the next 60 days, right? My nutrition, yes, it changes,
Hmm.
and I do end up, monitoring or tracking, depending on what I'm doing, just like anyone else, right? If they were doing, for instance, a gal I know is doing competition right now. Well, she actually just did her show. And she normally doesn't end up in track, but she had that goal of doing a physique competition. And so that meant she had to track for that. Now, obviously that's not sustainable, right? We To have a natural body, right, is
Hmm.
not the same as being in a physique competition show prep. And she would flat out tell you, I felt like crap during the prep because it's not fueling your body, and it's not giving your body what it needs.
Right.
When we look at food as just nourishment and what is it doing, to our cells instead of just numbing a craving, that's where you can take that piece out of the puzzle of, sure, there's stress in my life. I'm human, right?
Mhm.
Not going to end up and get away from that. But I'm also not going to let it control the reality.
Right.
And that's where having really that mind and body connection, or, check-in, is very important, because like you said, it's not that I wouldn't, go nose deep into it. I think that's there for any of us, but it's really that aspect of keeping it, pretty much on track.
Right. Right.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but
Oh, no, absolutely. I think too, sometimes it's routine,
mhm.
right? And that falls into the habit side, you know. Routine that we have is, and I'm very diligent about eating. We eat supper before the sun sets. We are eating, and no joke, there are times where I'm starting to fix supper at 4:30, because we're eating. But that's a habit, but it's a habit because I don't want to eat close to going to bed. But am I really hungry? Is it more because I have to feed my husband, right? So you kind of have to look at habit in a lot of ways too. Now I'm kind of I need to make sure, because I'm on a GLP-1, that I have to maintain my protein. So that's a little bit different kind of left turn that we're not going to get into tonight. But the other thing is speaking of hunger and habit, is how do you learn, right? What is emotional hunger and what is physical hunger? How do people start to really identify the need for food or distraction of food, or what are true hunger cues? Like, I think people don't even know what it feels like to be hungry anymore.
Yeah. Um, well, and that is again working on that emotional side, right? In
Mhm.
order to decipher, because there's a lot of times that people are also not hungry because of cortisol, right? You talked about eating before the sun's down, but for many people, I will end up and tell them to
Right.
eat with the sunrise, eating
Right.
first thing in the morning.
Which I
And a
do.
lot,
Yep.
a lot of people will say, but I'm not hungry. Well, that can end up and be cortisol. When you start to look
Right.
at hormones and this gradual rise that we should end up and have, right? True hunger is going to end up and come on gradual. If it's sudden and intense and you're hangry, then that's more of an emotional side, right? That's the not the physical side. That's all. I mean, sure, the stomach will growl, you may end up and be very low energy, lightheaded. Those are all the physical signs. But if you start to end up and have, the hangry symptoms, right? The tension,
Mhm.
the emotional wave, the um anxiety, anything along those where you're going to end up and snap at someone, or eat their arm up, those are more emotional side of things. And
Right.
when you start again to look at these hunger signals, right, when you have the leptin really docking at night and you're getting that quality sleep and the ghrelin is regulated, and the cortisol in the morning, you've ate and it's not sky high to the point where then end up over hungry or possibly even overeating. Um, that's all, again, that true hunger. And
Mhm.
also, if you are not restrictive to the point where then you end up in binge, right? The binge side of things is more that emotional side. It's the I can't stop. I'm, feeling guilt of eating what I've ate, and you continue to overeat.
Correct.
Where there's been times where even, when I meal prep, we were discussing this in one of the BNC meetings because I meal prep my food. Like I said, I just did it Sunday, so my whole week's planned. And there's times where because I've prepped it, I'm hungry and will start to eat my dinner. And someone said, "Oh, but if I end up and I have, a half a cup or a cup of blueberries or even strawberries for that matter, I'm potentially going to end up, wanting more,
Mhm.
or, I won't have this feeling of being able to stop, right? The contentness." And I said, there's days where I'll end up and I'll eat, part of my meal, and I'll get to that point where I still have, the fruit at the end of the meal this time of year, and I'm not hungry for it.
Yeah.
That's true,
Yeah.
satiety and hunger. When you can stop when you're full and feel content for hours after, again, whether it's 3 hours, whether it's 5 hours after a meal, that's knowing that you're good, right? That you ate when you were truly hungry
Mhm.
and you stopped, right?
Right.
We don't have to have these stretch receptors, and feel Thanksgiving full every time we eat.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing for many is they want that feeling. And
Mhm.
so there's such volume eaters instead of what is the food actually, doing for me? What is it doing for my mitochondria? What is it doing for my energy? And looking at it for nourishment instead of feelings, right? Is
Yeah.
this meal going to make me happy? Is this meal, that type of thing? When we look at it for what is this doing, for me and how is it fueling me,
Okay.
then that looks a little bit different.
But then we've also seen the other side of it where people aren't eating enough,
Hmm. They're
you
under
know,
eating.
they're under eating. And that was more of a oh, it goes back to the calorie restriction, right? That mentality of, oh, I can't have too many calories and not looking at the different macros and your different sources of your fuel. Um,
I think she
and
froze. I froze.
oh,
Someone froze.
did I freeze?
One of us froze. I
One
don't
of
know
us
which one
froze.
it was.
No, I was just saying that people fall into that pitfall, which is another extreme, right? Of not eating enough, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and that's where really part of me would say, for a person to look at things in patterns, right? And being in tune, because you and I have even talked about, where we don't necessarily have cycles. There's periods of the month where we're a little bit
Mhm,
hungrier, right?
mhm.
And that's kind of where I need to end up and get my lunar program set up too, because if you map it out and you cycle it out, it's usually around like the moons.
Yep.
There's periods where, for instance, this week is, you know, the full moon because we have a full moon on Sunday,
Mhm.
but there's times where you end up and you feast, and there's times where you don't eat as much, and really having kind of this cyclic pattern. And I even notice it in myself, right? I was telling you today, I had a salad, and I'm content with a salad where some people, could sit down and eat a salad and hour later be hungry, right?
Right, right.
But it's like I enjoy my salads. I enjoy my spring greens. Um and I'm content with it. Where like you said, having this gradual, right? Where there's periods where okay, let's face it, there's not a whole lot of, nourishment, but I also just ate, a steak and baked potato and green beans yesterday.
Right.
Um so I naturally wasn't as hungry today.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where, it's okay if there's days where you're naturally not hungry, but when those days start to become, days that you're only eating 800 to 1,000 calories, you're not eating enough. And so you really need to make sure that you are eating that nutrition for longevity and strength and, there's so many various issues.
Right,
um,
right.
that can come up if you don't eat enough.
Absolutely. And you know, protein is a priority for a lot of people. Now, individual, how much protein, right? We can go down that whole rabbit hole of, because there's influencers out there that say, people, oh, you have to have a gram of uh, protein per ideal body weight. And for somebody like me, my body, when I did that, went game on.
Mm,
We're going to hang on to that fuel source and we're going to turn it into glucose. And I gained weight. So I'm a person that can't do that. A lot of people, a lot of my clients I've ran into can't eat. And I've seen where, you know, one and a half, two times their idea. But I mean, I've seen some extreme protein. So have you.
mhm.
And yeah, that's a problem too. But you still need adequate protein at every meal. Um, and then you kind of weigh in with the fats and the good carbs and your different fuel sources and so forth. But um, I think we have a question in the chat. How do you get beyond not being hungry? Eat a good AM meal, 80% fat, and then not hungry later. Is OMAD okay?
So OMAD can be okay occasionally if someone is trying to do like a 24-hour fast. But many times what I see with OMAD in people is they try to cram a whole day's worth of food into that one meal.
Yep,
Instead of just doing a 24-hour fast and then eating a normal meal and then the next day, returning back to their normal eating, they try to end up and consume everything into that OMAD meal, and it starts to lead to digestive issues, it starts to lead to energy issues, it starts to lead to glucose issues. So there's several issues on the OMAD side of things. How do you get beyond not being hungry? Eat small meal. Your body will end up and adjust. Just start with a small meal. It doesn't necessarily have to be 80% fat. Yes, fat and protein, so healthy fats, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an 80-20 split. Um, Assuming, because I know who posted that, that
right.
they're not eating a lot of carbs, right? Some people will end up and have some lower glycemic carbs in their first meal, tolerate them, but you don't necessarily have to be 80% fat in that first meal. As your body gets used to eating that, I've told a couple clients, just eat a couple hard boiled eggs. If you end up and put, a little bit of butter with them, or, an avocado, um, that can be perfectly fine. Now, that's not your 30 grams of protein that I will typically try to tell someone to hit in a meal setting. Um, you should at least be somewhere, just under 30 to about 35, if not more, depending on your activity level in a
Correct.
meal for protein. So with that being said, if you eat um if you're not hungry in the morning and you eat, just that small meal and then eat a bigger meal for like lunch, as your body regulates and gets these hormones, natural sunrise, gets the circadian, because our digestive system is our secondary circadian signal too. So as we re-regulate these circadian hormones, that is going to end up and re-regulate too. And the more consistent you are on a daily basis with that, then that appetite will regulate. Um, if you are not feeling if you eat that big meal in the morning and then you're not hungry later in the day, are you not hungry for dinner, like lunch or dinner? Is that why you're doing the OMAD, because you're doing a breakfast to breakfast fast? um like I said, if you do that occasionally and put a 24-hour fast, there are benefits to the digestive system. I would do it on days that you're maybe not highly stressed, that you don't have a lot of activities, because fasting is a hormetic stressor. So with that being said, you want to minimize some of these other stress factors that you will end up and have if you're going to end up and do fasting.
Right. Absolutely. And so the other big thing is knowing what you really want before you eat it is can you trust the label, right? Certain things or products seem healthy. They're really marketing traps. Um, you know, what is the difference between foods that nourish you versus food that technically fits in your macros, right? I know there's somebody that we both follow that we we both have commented to each other that this person is eating within, what is it, the calories?
Mhm.
Yeah. And not necessarily
Yeah.
eating the food that nourishes them. So we watch that on this person's social media, and you and I've had many conversations on that, um, and also learning what the ingredients lists are, um, and the hidden words that mean sugar or the replacement for sugars or things like that. So, and I know you've been down this rabbit hole of trusting the labels, so I would love for you to weigh in on that.
Well, yeah, that's where you really, I always say eat the ingredients, not the label food. Because many times companies are constantly hiding things under a natural flavor, or I can't tell you how many times, things have been named and renamed. Um and I get that, right? Someone will come to me and they'll be doing keto or paleo or whatever, and it will be, keto's the biggest one right now,
Mhm.
but like bread, for instance, it'll end up and be, listed as keto, and maybe they've added a bunch of fiber or whatever to end up and make the net carbs lower. I've also had people come to me with, other foods, for instance, and such as, sourdough, because that's one of the big things right now.
Mhm.
They'll end up and they'll buy sourdough in the store. Well, it's essentially just bread with sour
Right.
extract added, and they're labeling it sourdough. That is not a true fermented food or a fermented, product. They're not doing it properly, and you can go back and listen, to our interview that we did with Dr. Bill in regards of
Mhm.
that whole process. But it's just, if you can stick to pretty much, and I say pretty much because we used to be able to say stick to the perimeter of the store, right? But now they're starting
Right.
to put the bakery on the perimeter too.
I
So
know. Yep.
don't end up the produce section, okay, great, right? The meat section, the dairy, for if you tolerate it, eggs, all of that is essentially on the perimeter of the store. Just stay away from the bakery. But
Right.
90%
Yep.
of people, if they just change that in their, food, um, they would be 100% better. And I was talking with a gal tonight, because when I when I meal prep for myself, it's my breakfast and lunch. But you and I were discussing the end of last week where I said I'm going to start switching up the dinners too,
Mhm.
and be planning out our dinner. I'll still end up and allow the family, whether it's a night of leftovers or a night that they get their choice, of what they want to eat. But I was gonna plan, at least 5, if not 6 of the meals for the week.
Yeah.
And again, that it was simple things, right? Like pork chops and grilled asparagus, um, chicken thighs, and you know, roasted vegetables with it. Like I bought some zucchini and some squash, and I'll roast those up with some potatoes and mushrooms. We used to grill. I was talking with my husband the other day, and I said, we used to chop those up and put butter and grill them in. I don't know why we ever stopped, but I'm like, we'll end up and we'll get back to that. So that's another night.
Yeah.
It's just planning things like that out. Again, it's all whole foods, right? It's
Right.
not coming from a box. It's not coming from a
No.
ingredient label that I have to read that I can't pronounce half the stuff that's in it. Um, for instance, we were discussing today on the BNC meeting where the additives that they even put in milk, right, to end up and um, I can't think of the potassium sorbate. No, potassium. Anyway, to emulsify it basically in the lower fat milks, and so you're
Oh,
not even
yeah.
truly getting whole milk, right, or real
Right.
milk. You're getting, and a lot of these emulsifiers are using seed oils. So it's all things like that that if you can get it from a farmer's market, if you can get it from a dairy farm, we were talking about you going and getting your sausages, right? From
Mhm.
what's in them,
Mhm.
right? If you
Yep.
have to end up and shop at the box stores, you and I talk about our Walmarts all the time. Um,
Yes.
pay
Sorry.
attention to what you're getting, right? Don't end up and get these products that you can't pronounce or you don't know what's in them.
Yeah, and the reason I'm laughing is
One door
because
Walmart.
I have a one-door Walmart, that I live close to. Literally, it's one door, and it doesn't have, like, what normal Walmarts should have, and poor Becky's on the phone with me a lot of times when I'm going in there to grocery shop, and she'll be like, "Well, that's located in such and such aisle," and I'm like, "Not here." And then I take pictures of, like, what and she's been sending me pictures of her Walmart shelves, and, like, they're different, and what was it? I walked by the yogurt and I said,
Mhm.
what did I say? I said something like, "Can I want some yogurt." And what did you say? "Well, you can if you don't care about the ingredients."
Yeah.
And I just kept on walking. Like, I was like, "Yeah, that
I'm
was
like
dumb. I knew better."
well, I'm sure there's probably a good option, right? That again, it goes back to that good, better, best, right?
Right, right,
Obviously, I end up and I make my own. I know what's, in
right.
my yogurt. Um,
Hmm.
sure, you can end up and buy, I buy yogurt for my daughter. Um, but there again,
Yeah,
it's one of those cases where, you know, if you know what's in it, great.
right.
If you're gonna end up and get some of these that, have more sugar in them than they are good,
Yeah.
then they're probably not going to be beneficial, but
And then I guess what's really funny about my Walmart is, I mean, we moved from the Houston area. Those Walmarts are completely different than what I see here. And I had made the comment to a local person one time. I'm like, how do you find stuff in your Walmart? Like they don't have stuff. And she goes, "What do you mean they don't have stuff?" And I was like, "Whoa, like that's crazy." Right. I know a lot of Walmarts carry Chomps, beef sticks, not my one-door Walmart, right? So, it's like, "Oh my goodness." It drives anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but the fact is good, better, best, like you said,
yeah.
and trusting that, knowing what's in the label. That's the big takeaway, really, is what Becky and I are in my roundabout way of saying I don't like my Walmart.
Right.
Yeah, drives me insane. Um, but yeah, and then I guess too is, are your healthy snacks? sabotaging your progress. Um, because there's a psychology to that. And I'm gonna throw my husband under the bus right now. So we had our brats and our sausages tonight, plenty of protein. Um, and he got done and he fixed popcorn. And I know that he wasn't hungry, but it was the habit and the snack
Hmm.
that he was after, right? And I threw him under the bus. I mean, he knows. But it just kills me, right? It cracks me up because we were taught popcorn's healthy,
Right.
right? So,
And it,
s
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say snacks are kinda liars.
Well, and again, it kind of goes back to that habit versus being in tune, right? Was he truly hungry? Probably not. He just got done eating.
Yeah.
But we're also, I mean, I can remember growing up, with even my grandparents, where they would end up and sit down with a little something, whether it was a dessert or a little something after the meal. And so I think many of us, were just kind of trained that way too.
Mhm.
Um, and then we turned into, the clean plate club, right? Where we had to
Yeah.
eat every morsel on our plate. And because there were starving kids anyway. Uh, all the excuses that we always got told, right?
Right.
And again, it's just we get so far away from the cues that our body ends up and gives us
Mhm.
that we're more creatures of habit than anything.
Yeah. So what tips could you give about dining out?
I'm pretty simple when it comes to dining out. I mean, I always start with a protein, right? What am I craving? I think it also makes a difference what time of day we're going out, right? Because if it's more of a lunch, then my lunch is a little bit lighter of a protein, right? I will normally do like my chicken, my turkey, those type of things. Um, at my lunchtime, if it's more of a dinner, then that's where which is kind of backwards when we look at digestion, but I'll have like a steak or a baked potato or something like that, where at lunchtime I'll have like a salad with grilled chicken. But the biggest thing will end up and be know what your place is serving. Maybe that's,
Right.
a lot of places end up and have a menu online. So, scan the menu. What do they end up and they have? Not saying that you can't go somewhere and find something, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If it's a place, well, say you're going to, a pasta place, right? Most of them end up and will have broccoli. Most of them will have chicken. You don't have to have the pasta, right? Tell them,
Right.
no pasta, no sauce. Get your grilled chicken, get some steamed broccoli, and guess what? You didn't add the Alfredo sauce, you didn't add the pasta. So you still end up and are able to. Because my girls, they love places like Olive Garden.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't eat the breadsticks,
Mm-mm.
so that's the other big thing. But and it used to always be my family would say, "Where do you want to eat? Because you're the picky eater, right? Or you
Yeah.
can't have." And I'm like, I can eat something anywhere. I can eat chicken. I can eat a steak. I can eat, I can eat something anywhere. It's being able to ask for those modifications and not feeling guilty. And a lot of people will struggle with the difficulty of asking and being very intentional
Yes.
with, whether it's asking for no seed oils. But the biggest thing that it's it's more known now that people are asking for these medications or they're going keto and doing, things like even the the quarter pound patties with lettuce at McDonald's, for instance, or maybe they're just doing the quarter pound patties, right? If they're more of a quote full elimination. And so people are more used to people skipping the bread or, whatever and
Right.
swapping it for the greens or, things like that. So don't hesitate to ask for those modifications. If someone starts to end up and give you pushback, end up and tell them you're allergic to it.
Yeah.
No establishment wants to have a allergic reaction on their hands, right? They don't want to have the possibility of being sued because they served you something that you were allergic to. So end up and tell them you're allergic to it. They will make the modification.
Yeah.
Um, instead of cooking things in the seed oils, tell them, request butter or tallow, things like that. But as far as meal goes, prioritize your protein. Start with some form of meat, eggs, fish, quality protein. Is it going to be your grass fed, grass finished? Maybe not, but that's okay. In my
Mhm.
opinion,
Mhm.
eat what you can afford, right? But your protein's going to end up in boost the satiety. It's going to end up and keep your blood sugar stable, and help preventing overeating the dessert at the end, right? So
Mhm.
prioritize your protein and then look at your sides.
Yeah.
I told someone the other day that wherever they were going, it was the meal was served with rice, and there was the steak with rice and then grilled veggies. And I said, tell them, because they were doing more of a low carb day, I said, swap out your rice for extra grilled veggies. Your
Mhm.
grilled veggies are typically things like the zucchini, the mushrooms, those type of things. Um, just ask for that simple swap. It'll be perfectly fine. And, stay hydrated with water. Don't end up
Mhm.
and do the alcohol. That's the other biggest thing. Not to say that I never have an alcoholic drink in the last 5, 6 years that I've been on this journey, but don't end up and start your meal with a bunch of alcohol because that's gonna end up and shut everything down. So, um, other thing go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I see a lot of people when they go out to eat, they think they have to eat like it's a holiday.
Mhm,
You know, yeah, I mean, and watch out for your sauces and your dressings. Those are huge. I know there was a place in Houston. It was a steak place. We would go. I would have steak and grilled vegetables, and I would add shrimp. And they brought it out, and I took a bite of one, and I was like, "Why does this grilled shrimp taste sweet?" Shrimp shouldn't taste sweet. So my husband ate one, and the wait waiter came back, and I'm like, "This is grilled shrimp." Well, come to find out, they marinate their shrimp in pineapple juice. And they were like, "Oh." And I'm like, No, I can't have that." And they took my shrimp away so fast, and so but it was a learning lesson for me to ask, "Do you marinate it? What do you
mhm,
marinate it in? I don't want it marinated. Can you fix my steak with butter only?" Things like that.
right,
So, what did I say to you today? I said, "I don't eat a lot of salads because I like the dressings, but I won't eat the dressings." Now, what I'll eat, if I go to a Mexican restaurant and have like a fajita salad or something, I use the guacamole as my dressing. But just little smart things like that. Um, I'm in there for the longest time, they bring the Texas Roadhouse is famous. My husband and I call them crack rolls, right? With the brown sugar butter in the oh, they smell wonderful. And for the longest time, I would say they would bring the basket, and it's like, I don't. don't even put that on the table. And then the longest time my husband would put it on the other side of the table. Now it can sit in front of me and it doesn't bother me. But those were little tricks that we used to do to help me out because I could probably dive face first into it and eat them all.
Mhm.
Right. Not
Well,
so much anymore, but
and I think that's where many times we're so rushed, right? We
yeah,
just need to kind of slow down, enjoy the people that we're with,
yeah.
really taste the food, right? Not feeling guilty of eating out, dining out, but tasting the food, knowing that you're choosing that choice, right?
Mhm.
It's not that you're having a cheat meal or anything along those lines, because guilt guilt starts to end up and set in when you look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Where if you look at it as you're making that choice, you're making that conscious choice to end up and go out to eat and eat whatever food you're eating.
Mhm.
But again, slow down and eat it, right? Enjoy the company. Many times, because let's face it, the cost of it, right?
Mhm.
We don't do it often. So
Right.
changing that mindset again around those meals.
Absolutely. So, um, and of course, we have a question from April, and she wanted to know how we feel about 100% pure coconut cream, no fillers, as a dairy-free option. And we know, and just so everybody, I'm going to tell everybody who April is. We interviewed April, gosh, year and a half ago. Has it been that long? Did you freeze? I froze.
Yeah, I think someone did.
Okay. Anyway, we interviewed April. April is a type 1 diabetic. So April's got a very, if you go back in a year and a half ago, look for April, you'll hear her story as a type 1 diabetic. So that's kind of the background of April. We need to have her back on, Becky,
We
because
do.
she's made some from when we interviewed her before to now. In fact, April, um, we're gonna get you on the schedule. So anyway, but I'm gonna let Becky answer this question. I know what I would do, but
I have not a problem with, because I end up and I get that some people do need dairy-free options.
mhm,
So the coconut cream is, it many times is not an issue. Now I do feel that coconut cream is a whole lot different than coconut milk or coconut water.
yes.
So there is that difference in that. So yeah, as long as you tolerate it, your blood sugar tolerates it, I don't have an issue with coconut cream.
And it's hard to find though in the
Mhm.
stores. Like if you go look at your coconut cans of coconut, like you'll see there's not a lot. Like it's hard to find. At least it is in my one door Walmart.
Many times for those of us that have a bigger, more two-door Walmart, um, it tends to end up and be in the ethnic aisle also.
Mhm.
So they have, a quality product there, but yeah, not a problem in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been down that road and trying to find, especially when I was in Houston, so I could go to places like Sprouts and Whole Foods and things like that to look for good coconut cream, not the it was
Mhm.
hard to find. I really did have a hard time. Um, that was the time period when I realized that I was eating cheese as a protein
Protein, right?
protein source. Like, I was eating so much cheese, it was easy, and all of a sudden, I realized I'm eating cheese constantly. And yeah, so it's been a while, but I do remember that.
Yeah, me too. Uh, that was where I'm like, cheese should be a garnish, not
Yeah,
a staple.
yeah, and it's easy to fall
It
into.
is.
You
There's
know,
a
we've
lot of people that are that way.
just your heavy whipping cream added to your coffee. It's like, are you really adding a tablespoon? Measure it out. You'll see how little that is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You and I both have been down that road many times because usually we're just globbing it into our coffee and you're not realizing how much you're getting.
Well, and that's where people will, when I work with clients and I'm like, okay, how much, dairy are you having, and that side of things, they're like, oh, I just have a splash in my coffee, or I'll have a tablespoon. Okay, well, how many coffees are you have? There's things like that, right? That it turns into more than just a splash. So, yeah. Anyway, I see April's other question. So, as far as the deuterium goes, the yes, but no. I know that's kind of a loaded question when we look at the coconut cream. Yes, it is a great plant-based fat side of things. Fruit of sorts is going to end up and have a higher deuterium level, but deuterium in a coconut is typically in the water content of the coconut. So if you're using things like the coconut oil, the coconut cream, you're going to end up and have a little bit lower because again, it's primarily carried in the water side of it. So if you've ever had a can of coconut cream where the cream separates and then there's the liquid at the bottom of the can, use the top part of the can and it's going to end up and be naturally lower. If you are someone that is doing a lower deuterium or a DDP, deuterium depleted protocol, then you would want to end up and skip that. But for most people, it's not an issue. If you're looking for an alternative that is lower in deuterium, you're going to end up and want to stick with those animal base side of things just because the animal base is so much lower in deuterium levels, and from a quantum circadian side, it is more compatible on that. Um, if you are someone that is also doing the DDP water, then make so deuterium is a loaded question. When someone is looking at doing a deuterium depletion, you have to look at all sources. You've got to look at your water. You've got to look at, all of this. So the the simple answer would end up and say coconut cream isn't necessarily bad. If you're working on deuterium reduction, but if you're working on a true DDP protocol, then you're going to end up and want to rotate that for animal fats. But it's not going to be harmful if you're just looking at optimizing
Oh,
mitochondrial function. Like I said, loaded question.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, anything else you want to add, Becky?
No, I was just reading April's other question. Yes, thank you. Train just because of all the toxins I work with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um look at minimizing. I wouldn't necessarily take all of it out because I know also the work that you're doing on broadening that scope. And we can always end up, in a meeting or something discussing it a little bit further because again, remember deuterium is the heavy isotope that is in the water side of things. So that's where it's going to essentially end up and be. Um, but there's also ways of depleting it. So
Definitely. Well, hopefully you learned some reality check moments tonight before making those food choices, separating the fact that it's hunger versus habit or the mislabeling of the health claims, understanding how your food really impacts your energy and your digestion, restaurant menu healthy tips, right? So you're not struggling. Um, it was we thought it was a neat topic to talk about tonight, and because we all fall into the pitfalls, right? Nobody's above it. So, you know, it's definitely before you eat that, think about things like Becky said, look up the menu before you go eat out. I did that religiously forever. Now I can pretty much walk into any restaurant and know I can eat because I'll make them fix me something to eat,
Yeah,
right? So things like that. But yeah, so we have a guest next week, don't we?
we do. We end up and have well,
Go
I'll
ahead.
let you no,
Oh,
2 weeks.
okay.
Sorry, not
Oh,
next
is
week.
it 2 weeks?
It's 2
Oh,
weeks.
darn.
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks. Okay. So we have somebody coming up in 2 weeks. It's a friend of mine. Um, you might even hear some stuff about me. I've known him, what did I say, 20 some years?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's seen my health struggle even before Becky ever thought about being my best friend. So so Danny's coming up in 2 weeks. And now that we've got April cornered, we're gonna get April back on. We definitely want to hear. I love April's journey because of being a type 1 diabetic. Um, she's she's very knowledgeable. She has really learned her body. Before she comes back on, go back and listen to her for the first time we talked to her, and then get ready when we. So April, get ready because I'm gonna send you the calendar link afterwards. So anyway, what else? I mean, that's it. That
If
was our Monday.
if there's any topics or conversation that, someone wants us to expand on, either send one of us a message. We do end up and put question box up occasionally. So, if you have questions when we do, these Q&As, or like I said, a topic specific that you want us to talk about or have a conversation, or even have someone on, as a expert in that area, we're more than willing to end up and reach out to them. I know we've reached out to several people, so we just got to end up and get them on the schedule. But yeah, let us
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and it'll notify you when we go live, which we go live every Monday evening at 7 p.m. Central. So, and happy, what is this? Today is Cinco de
Cinco de
Mayo.
Mayo.
Yeah, Cinco de Mayo. And we had sausage. So, I think we were off a little bit, but
That's okay.
um, but it's the start of another month. Let's make it a great month. And yeah, thank you so much. We really do appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful